Bob, one of the things that we saw last year at Carlisle, which impressed everyone, was your Dodge Daytona with its absolutely perfect mint-condition paint job, which you deprecated and said, no, this isn't nearly perfect, and then you showed us some imperfections that nobody else could see.
Well, when you're painting a car for the first time after 30 years of never painting a car before, it does get to be rather of a challenge, especially if you're painting metal flake. And I hadn't painted metal flake in such a long time. The first time I painted metal flake was on a '62 Chrysler, believe it or not, and it was a green. I hate to even suggest this, but it was a green, emerald green metallic, which was a Ford color. I'm sorry, but that's what it was, and it was a lacquer paint, and basically I rolled it on and got a perfect job. But in this particular case, I wanted to use the original clear coat over the base coat, and the preparation is the most important part. Basically, I took the car apart, and there's pictures of that in the gallery, in the Daytona gallery. You just look in the photo gallery, and then you see my cars listed. I have to change the header of it, and I will. But the preparation of the car is most important, and what I did was I took the whole car apart, and before I took it apart, I circled and photographed all of the imperfections that I thought that I was able to fix, so that as we were sanding away, we would have a graphic record of where the imperfections were if we couldn't see them, making it a whole lot easier. So then we pounded out some of them and glazed over some of them with body putty, some Bondo. Bought a whole gallon of Bondo and used maybe like a golf ball size because it was really that minimal. And then the red mud, or the red lead putty, and built it up until the body was as straight as we could possibly make it, given the time that we had. Then came the primer. The primer is a filler primer, and what the primer basically does is it goes ahead and fills in the imperfections that you missed the first time. But you sand it down, prime it again, sand it down, prime it again, and basically we're blocking it. And the most important part of the whole thing is to keep it clean. And I was extremely fortunate. There's a girl in, of all places, British Columbia, up in that area of Canada. I was introduced to her by Biz, who's frequents the forums occasionally. And he introduced me to her, and she and I communicated. I've got documents that she emailed me of how to do these various things. And she said, grab a bucket, put a cup full of soap in it, fill it up with nice warm water, soak your paper, and then use it to block out the car, but keep a spray bottle of the same mixture so that you can keep it wet the whole time. And this is how we do it when you don't have a whole lot of room, you know, and you don't have a whole lot of the resources. So we blocked it all out, and it looked okay. And then, of course, then the paint went on. But the imperfections you were talking about, when you're painting and you don't use the right reducer, actually the reducer was okay. It was I think it was a reducer. Basically, there's a fast, a medium, and a slow reducer. And when you use these, the fast, of course, is going to have the paint flash really fast. And depending on the temperature, that might be what you want, especially if it's in a cold temperature. Or if it's a warm temperature, you might want it to flash a little bit slower to give the paint the opportunity to flow properly. Well, paint, like other thing, has a grain, especially if you're dealing with metallic paint. So I painted in one direction, and I thought, you know what, I've got some paint left over in the can, and this is the front of the hood. I'm going to put a little bit more paint on here, and I went in the opposite direction. Bad move. So if you look at it in the light, you can see that the reducer that I used didn't allow the metal flake to lay down to match the direction that I took in the other direction. But you can only see it in the light. There's a couple of other areas, but we won't talk about those.
Now, how did you keep large dust particles, cat hairs, human hairs, leaves?
Well, I actually painted the thing in a paint booth. And another funny story, and I feel kind of bad about it because I really intended to visit with this club more often, but the Panhandle Ponies, once again Ford gets involved, Panhandle Ponies was being led by, or the president of Panhandle Ponies was a member of the Chrysler Club, the local Chrysler Club, and they suggested that I contact one of the ladies there who owns a paint booth because she does Mustang restores. So she graciously allowed me to bring the car in. So we towed the car there, put it in her paint booth, and we did all the work in the paint booth. So there are some bugs that got in, and when you find one, you just flake it off, and if it's in the wrong process, you end up with very small particles of wing embedded in your paint. But that gives it character. Not necessarily going to win any major shows with it, but it looks better than it did when it came from the factory, I think. No, do this. Not the bug, but the overall result.
Yes. Well, of course, I have a 1974 Valiant, so it came from the factory with bulges in the paint, misaligned trim, and
Misalignments, yeah, I ran into that problem. The Daytona is notorious for having the doors too far forward. And I've even had people ask me, why did your doors not interfere with the front fender? Well, for years they did, and the reason that the front of my door didn't rust was because it constantly was rubbing the rust off of the bare metal as it reached that one particular spot. Well, what I did was I removed the doors. After so many years, the car's hinge pins needed to be replaced. So I replaced the hinge pins, but in the process, I pulled the doors back nearly an eighth of an inch, so that the line in the front and the line in the back of the space between the doors and the fenders and the rear was the same. I did the same thing with the rear deck, and that was a challenge. And I did the same thing with the hood. And now they're all lined up. Another challenge was getting the round door for the gas cap perfectly round and in place as well. That was a challenge. It took a couple of washers and moving things around a little bit to build it out and move it over, but it got lined up finally. Spent about a day on that.
of course, one thing that I should tell people, I should ask you to tell people, is that your Daytona is not one of the very last ones to leave the factory floor.
No.
So all of this paintwork and all of these adjustments came, this is now the year 2007. What year is your Daytona?
My Daytona is an 86. I bought it in December of 85, so I'm the only owner of the car, and it has seen some action. My daughters drove it. There was a time where she was accused of ramming into the back of another car with it, but trust me, it didn't happen. The other car backed into her. That was another story. We don't have time to go into that, but there was that incident, and I drove it to Connecticut one time, and the door was bashed in. The only accident that it's ever had. You have these dings that you can't avoid, and I was stupid one day and backed into the Mustang, and did a little ding on the rear, which was taken care of. But beyond that, the car is solid. We had a couple of rust areas that we had to deal with. We dealt with those. And when we had the entire interior out of the car, because if you're going to paint the car, you have to paint everything. Taking a car to a place and having them slap some paint on it, that makes it look good for a little while, but they have to tape around everything. In my case, I removed all the trim, I removed the wings, the doors and everything to get everything lined up, but I removed the entire interior except for the dash and the steering column. That we taped around, but the entire interior got removed. We found a couple of rust areas there. I had an issue where my quarter windows on the side, those were also removed because I had some issues where water had gotten in and it eventually rusted some holes in the spare tires well. So we repaired that, and I found out where the water was coming in because I got in the car with the interior removed. I had somebody outside spray water on a water hose, and I said, there it's at. So we removed those, and we didn't break them, which is kind of remarkable. They're held in with 5 screws and butyl tape, and it's touted to be one of the most difficult windows to remove. But we took them out of there, didn't break them, and when I pulled the trim, the rubber trim off of the back glass, I did that because I didn't want to have no paint underneath,
Right.
you know, and I wasn't going to tape it off, so I just removed it. Once the car was finished, I had the glass guy come out, and I had him pull the rear. He wasn't happy. Pull the rear glass, retrim it, clean it off, reseal it, and I said, okay, now how much are you going to charge me to put these two pieces back in? Well, basically it was another bottle or a tube of that butyl, that liquid urethane. He says, I put this on there, those things are never coming out. I said, that's fine. So he put it on, slammed it in place, I put the screws in, tightened them down, and went to the other side. And I'll tell you what, I have not had any more water. So those side glasses were leaking. And you know, we painted underneath and cleaned them all up really well.
How about the one common place where even new cars tend to get rust is the bottom of the door seam?
The bottom of the door seam on the door itself?
On the door itself.
There is some issues with that. And in the back, after I painted it, this was, the paint job is now about 3 years old. I noticed that as, you know how the door skin comes around, then it comes up and then is welded to the underneath side? That's the part you're talking about.
Yes.
There's supposed to be a seam seal across that. Well, what happens is the seam seal itself gets so brittle and flakes off. And then, of course, the water comes in from the outside if you don't have those wipers. Now, those wipers are no longer available, I'm told, for my car. So you have to come up with another way to get those rubber wipers on the outside. Basically, what they do is they keep the glass clean at the same time they keep water out. Well, the majority of the water out anyway.
Right, and those are the things that are felt-like material.
It felt on the inside, rubber on the outside.
So we're talking about the side windows now, not the windshield when you say
No,
wipers.
no,
So
not
it's totally
the
different thing.
Not the windshield.
Right.
When you roll the windows down, these are the wipers that are on the outside. Well, if those are deteriorated to the point where mine were deteriorated, then water is easily able to get in. If it gets in, it's going to pool. It's going to pool, and of course, then rust happens. So the door that I had before I had the accident actually had some issues. And I was going to have to deal with that. Well, then the accident with the little crush on the door. Oh, well, got to replace the door. Found a door in Bluefield, West Virginia. The guy there has lots of Daytonas in the yard. Found a nice door, found a good price on it, looked at it. It was flawless. Well, it was red. My car's blue. So there's that flaw. But I took care of that. And in the meantime, basically to solve that problem, where the water comes in and you have the rust, it seeps down through the space between the frame and where it's welded up. Mm-hmm. The water seeps down in there, and of course it's just moisture, so it causes rust to occur. So what you have to do is you have to stop the rust from occurring. There's a product that is available from lots of places, but the one that is touted to be the best is from Eastwood. And they call their rust encapsulator. They have a rust converter, they have a bunch of other things. But the rust encapsulator, basically what is going to happen on my next project and to repair my rear deck is I'm going to get inside and I'm going to lay down a layer of rust encapsulator to basically seal the steel. Now the steel is going to be sealed. Any rust that may be there will no longer be forming new rust unless there's water and oxygen getting to the rust. Well, the rust encapsulator is going to encapsulate that to the extent that no more water can get there. And on the underneath side, where the metal is welded, bent up and welded in, I'm going to remove the seam sealer, clean it all out, put in the rust encapsulator, put a new layer of seam sealer. So in effect, those areas, if you can catch it before it gets like bubbly rust, and now you have to do some serious work to it, if you can catch it so that you notice that it's a little red and you'll notice that there's rust there, simply encapsulate the rust, put the new seam sealer on to prevent water from getting into that area, and you'll go a long way towards keeping it from becoming a hole. You know, you'll be able to save your doors from having to be replaced or having to be welded or anything. Yeah. On the new car, the black one, the new project, I bought it sight unseen, more or less. I mean, I actually gave her the money when I saw the car. But this is another 86. This was a Turbo Z. This one's going to get the same treatment. Interior's coming out, everything's going to be inspected, but I've got 2 areas in that car that are going to need some work. Apparently the seam sealer at the cowl, where the firewall and the dash sort of come together up in that area, the seam sealer is just flicked off to the point where water has gotten in there to the extent there's actually some really, really thin metal. I'm going to have to cut that out and weld the piece in. There's just no other way to do it. I also noticed that in the entire car, when I inspected it prior to buying it, there was a spot about the size of maybe $2.50 that is a hole in the rocker panel. Of course, that's going to have to be cut out and welded as well. If you got a hole, you're going to have to weld it. That's just the way it's going to be. But after it's welded, I'm going to coat it with the undercoating and the rust encapsulator to prevent it from rusting again in the future. Go up with another question?
Thank you very much, Bob.
Was that it?
I have appreciated your help.
No problem.